Dr. Rabin is a board-certified psychiatrist, neuroscientist, and health tech entrepreneur. He co-founded Apollo Neuroscience, where you serve as chief medical officer. Apollo Neuro developed the first scientifically validated wearable technology that uses gentle vibrations to improve sleep focus and stress resilience by signaling safety to the brain. Today, you'll share your insights into how Apollo Neuro's technology supports the nervous system balance and enhances well-being. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rabin. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks. I'll just let you take it over from here and I will hang out. Just let me know if you need anything. And for everyone else, if you can make sure you're on mute, that'd be great. Thank you.
So I think some of you are familiar with Apollo and my work, but I'll give a short presentation and then try to save enough time for questions at the end. Can you see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Is it full screen?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, great. So part of what I focus on in my research is understanding, and I've been studying chronic stress and mental illness for the better part of 20 years. I'm a trauma psychiatrist and addiction psychiatrist as my specialty, but really focused on treatment-resistant mental illnesses. So any mental illness that doesn't respond to treatment as usual and the gold standard treatments kind of falls into my domain. And one of the major focuses of my work is really trying to understand the root cause of mental illness, which is something that psychiatry as a field has been so-so at doing over the years, over the many decades, especially over the last several decades. We've mostly been using symptom-based treatments and not really treatments that kind of obfuscate the root cause. And so as we start to better understand the root cause of most mental illness, we are able to start to think about what it looks like to go from treating mental illness to actually curing it long term. And we won't be able to cover all of that today because it's a lot of material, but I'll summarize as much of it as I can. And I think the main question that I like to frame this this presentation around is, you know, many of us have not considered that it is actually possible to cure mental illness. These are diagnoses we typically administer to our clients and patients as chronic diagnoses where medication is required for life. And I think the real question that we need to ask ourselves going into the 21st century of mental health treatment is, you know, what if it were actually possible to cut rates of mental illness in half in the next 10 years rather than continuing to watch them skyrocket? And so I like to start out with, I like to start out with a brief history of human survival because Eric Kandel, who's one of the most famous neuropsychiatrists of our generation, who's in his 90s now, former Holocaust survivor and Nobel laureate from Columbia, was awarded the Nobel Prize for helping to explain how we learn and remember traumatic experiences and safe experiences, and that these memories are actually, and the process by which we remember these experiences is not unique to us. It's actually something that exists in all animals that have a nervous system going back over 300 million years to ancient primordial sea snails. And so this integration of what Eric Kandel discovered is something that I've been focused on a lot in my work. And a lot of it comes back to why our stress response system exists, and which is what we refer to as the sympathetic nervous system. And many of us are very familiar with this, so I'll go through it quickly. But in short, our sympathetic fight or flight nervous system exists to protect us from acute immediate threat. So things like lack of air, lack of water, lack of shelter and physical safety, lack of sleep, and lack of human connection. And when any of these 6 things are under threat, the sympathetic nervous system is supposed to kick on and divert all resources like blood to all of our organ systems responsible for getting us to safety. And in modern day society, we are in a bit of a different situation because thankfully, many of those 6 threats, if not all of them, are generally speaking not issues for us. And so we have yet other threats that we are facing on a daily basis that trigger the sympathetic nervous system into overdrive. And these modern threats that we interpret as threats because they're perceived threats, they're not actual survival threats, but our nervous system gets triggered into overactivity because of things like overstimulation, too many pings, too much news. We intake as much information in the first 30 minutes of being awake that when we look at our cell phones today, as the average human took in 1 week of being alive in the 1950s. So just thinking about how much stimulation we have now from smartphones and screens, it's quite a bit. It's substantially exponentially more than it was decades ago. Also, chronic illness, financial stress, legal stress, spiritual stress, all of these stressors trigger our bodies into being in a sympathetic fight or flight dominant state most of the time. And the reason why this is a problem and why it really affects a lot of illness is because this little area in the center of our brains called the amygdala, which many of you I'm sure have heard of, is responsible not just for detecting threat and fear, but it's responsible for detecting contrast, newness, uncertainty in the environment. And so when we are overstimulated or we're just stressed out, too much traffic, too much news, too many responsibilities, this area of the brain, the amygdala, gets overactivated as if we were experiencing a survival threat. And this part of the brain, which we call the reptilian brain, because it exists in back all the way from humans all the way back into ancient reptiles, is receiving information that is detecting newness and uncertainty, not just fear. And so anything, when we're surrounded by lots of newness and lots of uncertainty in our lives, this part of the brain gets overactivated by accident, not because of a survival threat, but our bodies get tricked into thinking that we're under survival threat. And so this part of the brain, when activated, again, is responsible for governing the hypothalamo-pituitary axis, the HPA axis, that governs cortisol release and the entire stress response in the body that results in this phenomenon we call anxiety. And anxiety is a signal that there is a lot of newness or uncertainty in our environment. And it's not good or bad. It's just a signal that says, hey, we need to pay attention to something going on around us. And one of the major sources of all anxiety is spending time thinking about things that are outside of our control. So there are lots of things under our control, like our breath, our physical movement, soothing touch, intentional listening, meditation, mindfulness, attention control itself. But when our attention is captured by the environment to focus on things that we don't have control over, this is the core signal that tells our amygdala to turn on, and then the stress response to turn on, and our bodies to enter a what we might think of as fight or flight or survival mode, which generally speaking increases inflammation in the body and worsens symptoms of all physical and mental illnesses. And so the modern neuroscience way to combat this, or the antidote, is safety. And safety is really a perspective shift, and it's reminding ourselves that we have enough air, we have enough water, we don't have any predators chasing us that are real predators threatening our survival, and that all of our core survival triggers are checked off. We're not under actual survival threat. And so that allows us the opportunity to do something in psychotherapy we call creating spaciousness, to take control over our attention again by taking a few deep breaths, or going on a walk, or splashing some cold water on our face, or just taking a moment to consider that we are actually safe right now, and that our bodies can enter a recovery state and be focused and creative and empathetic and all of the things that we need our bodies to do to function well. And so in summary, what chronic stress does is it increases sympathetic tone, decreases parasympathetic tone. The parasympathetic nervous system is governed by the vagus nerve. And the common results we see of increasing stress in the body from anything is loss of motion control, poor sleep, poor focus, low vagal tone as measured by heart rate variability, and increased blood pressure and heart rate. So full autonomic stress response in the body. And on the contrary, when we do vagal activating techniques, including using Apollo, And some of these vagal techniques include many of the things you already know about: biofeedback, deep breathing, meditation, sensory deprivation tanks, yoga, soothing touch, massage, listening to soothing music, vagal nerve activation, empathic listening, eye-to-eye contact, and soothing vibration, soothing touch, whether it's from another human or from technology. And so Apollo was designed based on this understanding of the autonomic nervous system dysfunction that occurs in mental illness from my work with veterans with severe trauma who are having trouble coming back to civilian life. And civilian life is arguably in every way much safer than wartime deployment, but the body of many of these veterans and their amygdala fear response networks have been trained to be in a hyperactivated state. So they come back to civilian life and they really struggle to increase their parasympathetic tone and get back into a what we might call normal level of functioning for an average human. And so anything that boosts vagal tone, which basically includes anything that reminds us that we're safe in our own bodies, improves control of our emotions, improves our sleep, improves our focus, and improves our cardiovascular fitness and vagal tone, improves our HRV, it improves our blood pressure and heart rate, and decreases inflammation, and has impacts on digestion, immunity, reproduction, et cetera. And this is kind of an overview of this delicate balance of the autonomic nervous system that's really at the root of all illness, particularly mental illness. And you don't have to remember everything on this slide, but I think it's a nice summary of how neuroscience has really come a long way in terms of describing what's happening when we get sick and when we're well. And to summarize this, chronic stress, which is triggered by fear, unfamiliarity, and uncertainty, results in increase in sympathetic nervous system activity, and then that results in increased heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, physical and mental restlessness, which is what we call anxiety, decrease in sleep, and then impaired creativity, focus, energy, and recovery. And we see the impact of that long term on the body by tracking things like heart rate variability, which is a sign of vagal tone that goes down when we are under stress. And again, balance to that to remind us we're safe is control, familiarity, and certainty. So reminding ourselves of the things that we can be certain of, like being able to take a breath right now by choice, reminds our bodies that we're certain, but we're safe. And when we're safe, our vagal tone goes up as measured by HRV, parasympathetic tone goes up, and that does the opposite of stress. And what's really important to note about this for our clients and for ourselves is that we are at the center of this balance. So simply by reminding ourselves that we're safe and doing techniques on a regular basis that remind ourselves we're safe, our vagal tone will go up and will restore balance to the force of our nervous system. And Apollo was developed because many of us struggle to do that on our own. We've known about breathing techniques and meditation and mindfulness and yoga for thousands of years, and they still exist in modern medicine, but our patients struggle to do them on a regular basis because when you're already stressed out, when you're already in this sympathetic fight or flight state, our bodies actually resist learning new things because all of our resources like blood are going to skeletal muscles, heart, lungs, motor cortex, amygdala, and that blood, there's only so much blood to go around. So when our blood is being diverted to those systems, there's not enough blood to feed the parts of our brain involved in creativity, empathy, recovery, or learning new things. And if yoga, meditation, and breath work are not something people have perfected in the past, and they're already under stress, then in a lot of ways, we are actually, as clinicians, accidentally signing our patients up for failure because it's extremely challenging for them when they're already in a chronically ill or chronically stressed state to learn these new techniques. And so what Apollo was developed as a bottom-up technique, which means hitting the body first and then the brain. And so the same phenomenon that you've all probably experienced when you're having a really hard day and you get a hug from a loved one or somebody holds your hand or you snuggle a pet or you hear your favorite song come on randomly on the radio, is a bottom-up response where the body is calmed by the sensory stimulation from the environment and the body is reminded that it's safe, which is why there's an almost instantaneous impact on our thinking, where you can go from having a really hard or terrible day to forgetting that you had a really hard or terrible day because one of your favorite songs comes on in the car or when in a room you walk into. And that effect is a bottom-up technique. And so we developed Apollo to tap into that system to boost vagal tone and help the body recover more quickly, and by reminding the body that it's safe through the sense of touch using technology, because we can't always have another person there or an animal there to snuggle or to hug. So this technique is something that, again, is evolutionarily conserved in all mammals. Soothing touch is something that we all have experienced from the moment we're born, when our moms cuddle us and nurse us, um, to the moment that we are, challenged in childhood or in adulthood, and we experience this on a regular basis, but we need to experience it more. And it's really based on the neuroscience of how therapeutic and healing touch can be for us, and how much more of it we really need in our lives, because soothing touch, whether it comes from a loved one or a pet or Apollo, is boosting activation of the vagus nerve, which then results in increased parasympathetic tone and therefore increased dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, oxytocin, and all of these helpful neurotransmitters and hormones that actually help to calm the body and bring us into a state that's primed for healing. And I forgot to put a slide in here, but there's an important paper that came out in, I think it was 2022, that talked about how the neurotransmitter imbalance theory of depression is actually not true and not evidence-based, and that people are not born with depression in 99.9% of cases. It turns out people get depressed because of traumatic experiences. And if we think about and traumatic experiences that we're not prepared for and we don't have support afterwards to cope with adequately. And so this understanding of mental health from an autonomic nervous system perspective actually requires a redefinition or a new description of trauma and healing. And so the way that we have described that based on modern neuroscience is that traumatic experiences are intense, meaningful, challenging experiences over time where we perceive ourselves to be threatened, for which we did not have adequate preparation or support. And the support piece is really critical because lots of people have challenging experiences all the time. When somebody comes to that, when somebody who's had a challenging experience comes to us and says, "Hey, I just had a really hard time," and we say, "Why did you let that happen to you?" Right? What's wrong with you that you let that happen to you? Which happens especially to traumatized women with sexual trauma from their loved ones. That is actually victimizing the event and victimizing the individual and reinforcing fractured self-trust. And so that results in a more negative reference towards ourselves and to the world, and it results in decreased vagal tone, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And so there's actually neurological correlates to the experiences that we have, and our bodies store that memory. And when we think about healing from this updated perspective of trauma, healing is really very similar. It's intense, it's meaningful, it's challenging, but it is occurring in the context of safety. And when we feel safe and adequately supported and have adequate preparation, then we can actually develop a more positive reference towards ourselves in the world, and therefore increased vagal tone that persists over time that predicts a positive healing response. So these neurological correlates for healing and traumatic events are very, very true. And it turns out in this giant umbrella study of over 100,000 people looked at with looking for neurotransmitter like serotonin imbalances in depression, it turns out that almost everyone, like 99+% of people who have depression, have it because of unprocessed, unresolved, unhealed trauma. And what's the best treatment for depression that works better in this study, massive study, that works better than SSRI antidepressants? It's actually exercise and vagal activation techniques. So this is really important to understand, because safety is really required for learning and healing. And this is really the modern foundation of how we approach mental illness today. And so our idea was, after studying this, well, if, the question really that came up was an audacious question, which is like, what if technology could remind our bodies that we're safe enough to learn to heal ourselves again? And so we thought about wearables and we thought about phones and technology, and we realized that there's a lot of technology out there that tracks our bodies, that tells us about our bodies, it gives us data, but there's not a lot of technology that actually changes our bodies for us. And so we wanted to develop a technology that could actually leverage this neuroscience to positively impact healing states in the body, and ideally pull from our data sources to understand when the body is looking like it's sick or going to be sick, and then intervene in advance. And so we developed this technology at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center between 2014 and 2018. We now have 17 clinical studies completed and 12 more underway, all demonstrating that by improving autonomic nervous system activity focused on vagus nerve activation, not just in the moment, but on the go, that we are able to improve symptoms in many different illnesses. And to give you an idea, this is the first paper that came out in 22 demonstrating that the Apollo vibrations actually improve vagal tone and heart rate variability in as little as 2 minutes in a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial of collegiate athletes under stress. This was also replicated in the regular healthy population with folks under cognitive stress, showing improved performance with vagal nerve stimulation through Apollo. And then this is a study that came out this year that is symbolic of a lot of the other data we're seeing from both mental health populations and physical health populations. This is in a study of folks with severe systemic sclerosis, which is a very severe autoimmune disorder that is terminal illness. And we saw that in these folks who have no responses to any medicine, they get worse until they die. That using Apollo for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours a day dramatically improved, and by dramatically I mean clinically and statistically significantly improved in just 3 weeks, their sleep, their depression symptoms, their quality of life, their social functioning, their anxiety and stress, their pain scores, and their Raynaud symptoms by changing vascular tone, which is a vagal regulated system. And so this kind of gives you a sense that regulating vagus nerve and autonomic tone actually has physical health impacts as well as mental health impacts. Did their systemic sclerosis get cured by using Apollo? No. But all of the symptoms that made their lives hard because they were diagnosed with a severe terminal illness that impacts their autonomic nervous system, many of those symptoms did get better and their quality of life improved dramatically. And so this actually plays into sleep in a study that you get a preview of that's coming out this year of 1,300 people that we tracked over 3 years, showing that using Apollo for 3 hours or more a day increases your deep sleep, it increases your heart rate variability, it increases your total sleep time by over 30 minutes a night, and it decreases your resting heart rate. And these are, again, statistically significant findings in people tracked in the real world, not in a lab, but in the real world. And we start to see these changes in as little as 21 days. Similarly, we have a VA study that replicated this pilot data that is coming out this year. And the VA study showed these similar findings where folks with severe post-traumatic stress disorder using Apollo for anywhere from, this was 2-week study, the VA study was 12 weeks, but almost everyone had significant reductions in symptoms, including sleep and mood and anxiety symptoms from using Apollo for just a few weeks. And now we have, as of November 23, we have AI integrated into this technology. So this is called Smart Vibes for anybody who's familiar. And Smart Vibes takes your data from Apollo, which tracks sleep, and from Oura Ring, and then tunes Apollo to your body to send you the therapeutic vagal nerve stimulation that you need when you need it throughout the day to preempt the symptoms that you might develop as a result of stress. So this is kind of the future of where wearable technology is going, where we're not just treating something after it's already happened, we're actually addressing it in advance in a preventative way. And this is the first technology that in real time can actually predict unwanted wake-ups at night and turn on automatically to help you stay asleep. And from that, the number one neuroscience takeaway is that safety is required to optimize learning and to make meaningful life changes that stick. And if anybody would like to try Apollo who hasn't and you have an iPhone, we now, as of February, have a free version that's available on iPhone for anyone. And you can just scan this QR code and download the app and try it on your phone at any time and feel what we're talking about. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rabin. That was wonderful. Especially the stress physiology research is really impactful. I'll open the floor. How much time do you have for a few questions?
I have probably 10 minutes.
Okay. If it's okay, one that I get from patients and then one I have myself. I'd love to hear if you're up for speaking about it, more about nervous system dysregulation's effect on in the immune system inflammation. And then one I ask is like, how do the different vibrations, how do you guys find the different vibrations for the different programs, focus, calm, sleep? So either of those, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, so the short answer to that is double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials, because we had no idea how these vibrations were going to impact the body. There was actually a decent amount of literature prior to 2014 that had published on different sound waves and how sound wave vibrations through your ears can change vagal nerve tone and improve everything from focus to calm to your breathing rate, your heart rate, et cetera, and vagal tone. And there was a little bit of research on vibration and a lot of research on electricity. And if you have, I don't know how many people here remember their physics education from college or high school, but in physics, frequency is frequency. And if you deliver a vibration rhythm that's sound or vibration you feel or electrical stimulation to the body, if the frequency is the right rhythm, then the body will sync up with that rhythm. And that's why when you hear a song you like, your body can start to move on its own, because your body is actually resonating with the rhythm of that song, even though you're not consciously thinking about it. And so we ended up, from all of the prior research with hundreds of publications that had been published before 2014 that we reviewed, we went back to the lab and parsed those out into the vibratory rhythms, the frequencies that were most likely to induce the different states we were looking for of heightened vagal nerve activation and heightened focus and calm. Those are like the major goals for us. And we basically took 40 people and put them into a laboratory setup in a electromagnetically soundproof shielded cognitive neuroscience lab and connected them to EEG brainwave assessment, heart rate, EKG, breath rate assessments, pupillometry assessments, and physical motion assessments, and then put them under physical and cognitive stressor tasks with 20 different vibration patterns and no vibration conditions. So there were active controls, placebo, and then Apollo vibrations and no vibration, and they were all randomized. So nobody knew when they were walking into this laboratory setup what the vibrations were supposed to do, which vibrations they were getting. It was completely blinded, and the researchers didn't know which vibration patterns or conditions a given subject was experiencing at any given time. And we asked people not only to participate in these stressful tasks and measure their performance and their physiology, but we asked them to rate on a scale, did what you feel in the last 30 seconds make you feel more energized or more sleepy or something in between? Or do they make you feel more upset or more happy or something in between on a 2-axis scale? And it's called a valence and arousal scale. And it's really interesting is that within just 30 seconds of feeling these vibrations, we weren't sure people would be able to notice a difference and report consistently in 30 seconds. But what's interesting is in 30 seconds, if you force people to answer subjectively how they feel in terms of energy and mood, that roughly 80% of people report the same things for the same vibrations or no vibrations. And that was really interesting. And so that really created the framework for which vibrations could take people into different states of either focus or social creativity or heightened empathy, cognitive performance, or more recovery, calm, relaxation. And interestingly enough, when we saw the reports come back from that study, we basically took all the vibration patterns that put people into negative arousal states like anger, frustration, sadness, things like that, and we just eliminated them from future studies. So we didn't want to make people feel that way, so we just threw them out. And then we took all the ones that made people feel good and in the happy end of the spectrum, and we moved those into further research. And then we made wearable prototypes and distributed them to 3,000 people in the real world between 2017 and 2020 before we released the commercial product. And then just did survey follow-up with people and asked if they were experiencing the same things we saw in the lab. And it turned out they were. And then just continued to refine and iterate the vibration patterns until we could hit relatively consistently about 90% of people to get the same responses to these different vibrations. And then that resulted in the product that we released in 2020 that you see me wearing on my chest.
Yeah, got mine on. Yeah, no, that's really exciting research. I'm sure you're still doing more in refining and coming up with new uses and new vibrations. I'm really excited to keep seeing what you're doing. Thank you so much. Do you have a moment to speak about nervous system dysregulation's effects on the immune system?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is, again, if you go back, can I go back in a slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you go back to the autonomic nervous system balance, what happens, the fact of the matter is there's only enough blood to feed all the systems of our body or certain systems of our bodies at any time. So in a resting state, we have enough blood to generally perfuse our entire bodies and give ourselves at all the organ systems adequate nutrients, including the immune system, and remove waste efficiently. When we're under stress, blood vessels that go to the immune system, reproductive system, digestive system, empathy system, and sleep and recovery, those vessels all clamp down because you don't want those systems to be activated when you are running from a lion, right? Like we evolved for that not to happen, because if we were thinking about fighting off illness or reproducing and diverting resources to those systems while we were actively running from a lion, we would die. We wouldn't have the resources to feed our skeletal muscles, which is arguably one of the most resource intensive systems in the body. And so if we think about this as a resource allocation problem, if there's only enough resources to go around, then we have to have our nervous system in balance to be able to perfuse all of the immune system and reproductive system, digestive system fully, and remove waste from those systems so that they can function and not over toxify themselves with, metabolic byproducts from being undernourished and underperfused. And so it's really a blood flow issue. So chronic stress increases inflammation and it decreases resources to the immune system, which increases immune system dysfunction. And that's why we see very commonly when you're stressed out for a long time, you will increase your chances of getting sick. There's no doubt about it. That's like something that we see all the time in ourselves and our patients. And so that's because our immune system is just not receiving the resources it needs to function at the level we're asking it to function at. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've read a ton of research on stressors, chronic acute stressors also being, as you mentioned, directly stimulating for inflammation, different inflammatory cascades, and having different responses to pathogens under different types of stress. So yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody's followed, I know it's a little bit avant-garde, but if you've ever followed the work of the famous breath worker, what is his name? It starts with a W.
Wim Hof.
Yeah, Wim Hof.
Yeah.
So Wim Hof is a perfect example of this because he has been able to demonstrate that when he gets an LPS injection, which is an injection of the inflammatory, the specific inflammatory antigen that is known to dramatically increase the inflammatory cascades in both humans and animal studies reliably, that just by doing vagal maneuvers like very slow, deep breathing, he can shut down that inflammatory response consciously. And there are other examples of this in animals with vagal activation, but there are very few examples of this in humans. But I think he's a really interesting case where he has been able to demonstrate in a very real situation that is only explained by this modern understanding of the autonomic nervous system, that he is self-regulating through breath and vagal tone activation his entire immune response, even in response to something that's as triggering as LPS. So if he can resist LPS, then we can tune our vagus nerve to resist and adapt to stress better. It just requires a little bit of practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll open up if you have a couple more minutes. Is there any other questions from anyone else?
I have a question.
Hi, Keith.
Hi. And you talked about learning in the context of safety, and maybe you talked about healing in the context of safety. What do you mean by safety?
So safety meaning that we are reminding ourselves that we're not under survival threat.
Okay.
So safety is represented in the body as vagus nerve activation. So we have we have two parts of our autonomic nervous system in the body. There's the sympathetic fight or flight nervous system that's governed by the amygdala that regulates our stress response. And that part of our system is responsive to fear, uncertainty, and to newness, contrast. That is a fear-based response. Fear makes it really, really hard to learn new things because it takes resources away from our learning parts of our brains, like the hippocampus, that stores short-term memories, transmits them into long-term memories, and it takes resources away from that system. So when you increase vagus nerve activation, which is the vagus nerve is directly responsive to safety stimuli. Safety includes soothing touch, soothing music, slow, deep breathing, anything that calms your body, feeling ocean waves wash over you, smelling the favorite food that your parents used to make when you were growing up. Any of those stimulations boost vagus nerve activity. So safety is kind of in our world, modern world, it's a nebulous term, but it actually has a neurological correlate. So when you think about safety as what is the neurological correlate, like what happens in our nervous systems when we feel safe, when we're soothed, what happens is our vagus nerve activity goes up. So the way we measure safety now is by measuring vagus nerve activity through heart rate variability, for instance, which is our most reliable, easy measure of vagus nerve activity. So you can do, if you can do these experiments yourself, but there's tons of literature demonstrating that any of these techniques I just described to you boost vagus nerve activation and increase our ability to learn. The reason being because resources are going back to the learning parts of our brains. And those learning parts of our brains also include the parts of our brains that are responsible for us getting deep and REM sleep. And hey, come here. And deep and REM sleep are critical for memory consolidation. So the transmitting and organizing of short-term memory from our hippocampus into long-term memory in the cortex happens because we're getting good, deep, restful REM sleep. If we're under stress or we're feeling afraid, then we're not going to get good REM sleep. So our memories don't go from the short term to the long term. They just kind of disappear. And that's not helpful, right? That's not going to facilitate learning of new things. So the idea of safety, soothing the body, striving for comfort, and learning how to tolerate discomfort better by tuning our vagus nerve is actually the critical neurobiological key that unlocks learning. And this is why kids struggle to focus in school. If you're worried about being picked on in school, that means you're going to feel unsafe around your peers. You're going to feel not accepted by your community, right? So if you're focused on that, then how are you going to be able to focus on learning math or learning how to spell, right? It's going to be really hard. And so many of the diagnoses that happen today of ADHD and ADD are actually misdiagnosed chronic stress. When you treat the chronic stress in kids, their ADHD symptoms completely resolve, right? So should we be giving them amphetamines or should we be helping them cope with stress better and reducing the stress inputs? We should be reducing the stress inputs, not giving them medicine. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you.
I might
Sure.
make a pipe in about stress resilience, and you can always cut me off if you need to go. But like we preach a lot stress resilience and stress perception, because of course some people will have massive sympathetic activation from walking into a party, and other people will be calm when they're jumping out of an airplane. And so perception and stress resilience is, do people respond differently to the same stressors? And so that's probably something you would talk about is our cultivation of our vagus nerve and being in parasympathetic, even with excess or negative stimuli or stressful situations.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's why Apollo is so effective, because you can wear it all the time. And when you can have that soothing physical sense of comfort all the time, then when you walk into a party or you're about to give a presentation and you feel your heart rate go up and you start sweating from your palms and your thoughts start racing, all of a sudden you realize, oh, my body is calm right now. Like I'm actually safe in my body. And the soothing vibrations that you feel from Apollo are targeting the same parts of our brains that getting a hug from a loved one before doing any of those activities would do. But you can't get a hug from a loved one on stage, right? You can't get a hug from a loved one when you're at a party all the time.
Yeah,
Sometimes we have to do it on our own. And so, but we haven't learned to do it on our own. So a lot of this is just we haven't taught these techniques properly to reinforce calm and safety and therefore vagal nerve activation in young people. And if we and this is why in many Eastern cultures and in Europe in education, they actually teach meditation and mindfulness and yoga techniques to young children in kindergarten through fourth grade, elementary school level, because that teaches them to self-soothe. And if you teach kids to self-soothe, what you're actually teaching them is to boost their vagus nerve activity on demand, and then reminding themselves they're physiologically safe to deal with whatever it is that's facing them. We don't want to freak out every time we go on stage and present or every time we go to a party. That's not helpful. It's not conducive to functioning well in society. So doing these techniques and training these techniques at any age works. Doing it with young kids works even better.
Yeah, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But like, I love my job. It's very stimulating. And so when I wear it all day, well, the way I describe it is it just gets me, I'm just less worn out because I'm always advocating like turn your tabs off, like close some tabs. But you know, in the type of work we do, we can't do that. And so for me, this is a buffer against the kind of wonderful stimulation from information and in interaction, but it just really helps me be less depleted from all of it. So yeah, I guess that's also a plug for like we can't always sometimes there's safety feelings of not feeling safe might be legitimate where we maybe are under threat. That's wonderful. Maybe we are not in a condition that is hard to self-soothe or maintain equilibrium. And so this to me is just a really nice buffer against that.
Yeah, exactly.
I
mean,
can't
it's like
work with me, so
I mean, I think what I would liken it to is that you would never expect yourself to know how to drive if nobody instructed you how to drive, right? You never expect yourself to drive well if nobody taught you. You wouldn't expect to know how to concentrate on something boring and study if nobody had taught you how to concentrate and study, right? There are all these things that we do in our lives as humans that require a little bit of education and teaching. And if our bodies learn to react in a certain way, then we start to automate that process, even if that process isn't serving us. And if we never learned how to feel calm in a stressful situation where we're managing expectations of others, for instance, like giving a talk or spending a lot of time working all day in front of a screen or any of these other things, then it's not really fair to yourself to assume that you should know how to do it if you've never learned. And so a lot of this bottom up teaching, which is like helping the body feel soothed so that our minds slow down and we start to gain more access to our faculties and attention, is really just about retroactively retraining the body by reminding ourselves that we're calm enough to be able to focus and to be able to just be ourselves and to be able to do XYZ thing that we're trying to do, even though it might feel profoundly unsafe.
yeah.
And it turns out when our bodies are actually unsafe, when we're actually running from a bear or when we're actually out of air or water or food, our bodies, like you won't be able to stop and take a breath. Your body will take over. And we don't want that to happen when we're stuck in traffic or answering emails or on stage, right? We want to have our faculties. And so it's really just about retraining. Sorry, Daisy is getting a little overactivated. Trapped in my office.
She needs to cuddle.
Yeah.
Yeah. She makes her needs known. Yeah. No, I use the metaphor of tennis all the time. Like you wouldn't expect to know how to play tennis if you've never practiced. So we've been advocating mindfulness meditation, breath work, all kinds of, trauma work. But like people are like, well, I tried breath work when I was having a panic attack. It didn't work. And I'm like, well, that's because it's a learned skill. And so we really advocate trying to get people to practice on a daily basis. So when the lions do strike, you have cultivated your nervous system. I use Star Wars metaphors of like Luke had to go learn from Yoda before he could face Darth Vader. And then when he could stay centered in front of Darth Vader, then he could, save the Empire or fight the Empire. I can't remember. I'm not really a Star Wars person. So,
Yeah,
all
no,
right.
that's a great analogy. The Star Wars is full of wonderful metaphors for us.
And metaphors. I see Valerie has a
Yeah,
question. Just cut us off.
just a quick question.
Yeah.
I wanted to know about what these sensations feel like, because I would consider myself to be sensitive to stimulus, like physically. Um, is that not an issue that people find? When your nervous system is like highly activated, those kinds of
Do you have
sensations
an
can
do you have
be
an do you have an
overstimulating.
do you have an iPhone by chance?
I don't, unfortunately.
Oh, well, if you are around somebody with an iPhone, just have them download the app. And it takes like 60 seconds and just open it. You don't have to do anything and you can feel it. But the vibrations feel barely noticeable and you can adjust the intensity. So for people who are more like craving of sensation, you can turn it up. For people who are very physically sensitive, you can turn it down. Um, and the vibrations are really, they feel kind of like humming or
Okay.
chanting Om or feeling or like an ocean wave gently washing over you. They're very, very gentle and they're made to be almost unnoticeable
Okay.
because they're not supposed to be distracting. The whole goal is that you are present, not paying attention to the vibrations, because that would be a
Right.
sensory diversion, which is not
Yeah,
good.
that's what I was thinking. I was like, it's gotta be okay, but I just thought I would ask.
Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have time for one more for that with from Allison?
I do. Can you hang on one sec?
Of course, yeah.
I have to take.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just say, like, I am obviously not like a promoter of this. I'm truly just a big fan. But yeah, I will say I had one patient who she never tried it, but she was worried of trying it because she says she's sensitive to electromagnetic stuff. I consider myself pretty sensitive, like yeah, and I never intended to get on board with this. I'm kind of not a total Luddite, but a little anti-tech. Like I've practiced meditation for years, and I still find huge benefit because I still didn't realize it till he said, but I'm still pretty overstimulated for a living, wonderfully so. But I'm a sensitive person and still find and have a long meditation practice and still find it really beneficial.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just chat a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I used to work in research, and we would basically stress rats out and test their inflammatory responses to things. And we would see inflammatory responses to stress without the LPS challenge, lipopolysaccharide, and completely different immune responses, inflammatory responses to LPS challenge under different types of stress, like social defeat. We would see less of a robust, it can go both ways depending on the type and the duration, either a weakened immune response or a heightened immune response. It's almost over defensive. You can kind of anthropomorphize that, like their immune system's almost overreacting because of different things. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you have time for one more, Allison, thank you.
Yeah, I have time for one more.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. Thank you for all your education too around these really important topics. I love hearing you talk about children. I think your message needs to find its way into schools everywhere. I originally
Working on it.
Apollo Neuro for my 10-year-old son, and he actually at first refused to wear it. So then I started to wear it, and it changed. It got rid of all my sleeping issues and keeps me calm during the morning and nighttime routines, which for our family of 5 is a stressful times of day. And then he was
Yeah.
curious about it because he saw me changing, and now he requests it every night. So I actually have to take it off of his ankle when I'm getting ready for bed. Probably should buy a second one. But my question is actually it's very specific. It's about the different points on the body that you recommend wearers using it, on the ankle, the wrist, and then the breastbone. Curious if different users would experience better results, moving it around the body and trying to find the just right spot on the body. I'm curious about why those places, why those different bones. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. And I just posted a discount code in the chat for anyone here who wants to
Thank
get
you. I'll
get
use
one
it.
or get another one from our website. The basic reason for the locations is that those are the easiest places to wear Apollo
Okay.
for most people. But what's interesting from our clinical studies was that the location doesn't really matter that much as long as you can feel it.
Yeah.
So, for instance, when you get touched nicely by a loved one it doesn't really matter where you're touched. It always feels good. If you get touched in this exact same way nicely by somebody you don't like or don't feel comfortable around, it always feels bad, right? So the physical, like the touch receptor system is very interesting because it is uniformly connected to the hypothalamal pituitary axis. So no matter where you're touched, as long as the touch input is soothing and comes from somebody that you feel safe around or from something that you feel safe touching you, you will activate the same parts of your nervous system. The reason why I particularly like the ankle and why the ankle and the breastbone tend to be the most popular locations for Apollo is because Apollo vibrations are very, very low frequency vibrations. So Apollo is sound waves. So one sec, sorry. Daisy.
I think your dog's perfectly demonstrating the need for soothing. We all
An
want to be
animal
our
wearable.
dog. Yeah, we all want to be pet all day long.
Daisy. We have a babysitter in the house today, so she's like, I need to go check on the baby.
Oh,
What is this?
good girl.
We have a newborn, so
Oh, congratulations.
thank you. This is Sammy.
Hello, Sammy. Without any of the prefrontal, he'll demonstrate all of the nervous system needs and yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
This is all real. When you have kids, this immediately becomes noticeable.
Oh,
But basically, the reason why the ankle and the chest is because Apollo is sound wave vibrations, and the frequency of the sound that Apollo emits, whether it's coming from your phone or it's coming from the wearable, is like what comes out of a string like stand-up bass or what comes out of a subwoofer. And these are under 200 hertz sound waves. So they're sound waves that you can hear. If you take Apollo and you hold it right up to your ear, you can hear it. But you don't, but our touch receptor system is actually more receptive to vibration and sound waves under 200 hertz than our ears are. And so you can just like the volume of Apollo compared to sound you hear is like, this is like under 5 decibels. So it's like not particularly audible. Whereas like the average sounds you listen to when you listen to music is probably in like somewhere between anywhere from 30 to 80 decibels, depending on how loud you like to listen to your music, which is exponentially more volume. That is because you're hearing it through your ears, and our ears like that better. But our touch receptor system responds to low frequencies better through dense material because, going back to physics, low frequencies transmit better through dense material. And so that's why if you've ever been to a concert or a live music show, when there's a big bass instrument or there's a lot of bass in the music, you feel it very, very much in your body more than you hear it. You still hear it, obviously, but you feel the bass in your body more than you hear the bass. And that's why live music is so fun to listen to live, because they have the sound systems that are capable of delivering those low frequency vibrations in a way that you can actually whole body feel it, not just hear it. And when you're listening to that same song on your headphones, it doesn't sound as good because you don't feel it throughout your entire body. So applying the Apollo vibration specifically to dense bone, the densest bone being that's easy to deliver them to is your sternum and your ankle, your leg bones, and then thirdly your wrist, and through your arm bones. And when you deliver those vibrations through dense bony material, it transmits much better to the whole body. If you put it on a more fatty area of the body or an area that has more looser, less dense tissue, you have to turn the intensity of Apollo up a lot to get that same whole body feel that you would get with just a teeny bit of vibration on your sternum or your leg. Does that make sense?
also explains why I fall asleep at the symphony. Thank you.
Exactly.
It's great sleep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to talk with you all day long. We really appreciate you coming and speaking with us and taking extra time to answer questions. The discount code that you posted down at the bottom is Clinic15, apolloneuro.com. We also sell them here for similar prices here too. And you can try them out. We actually have people just sign a little lease and you can try them for a week if you want. You don't have to purchase it. yeah, we'll be rebroadcasting this. We'll send it out to our people, and just, yeah, I'm a big advocate. I'm excited to see what else you've got coming down the pipeline in the evolution of the Apollo Neuro. So I really, really appreciate your work. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, it's my pleasure. And there's lots of exciting stuff coming, and I would recommend actually to get them through Tressa rather than through the code I gave you,
Either way,
because she has special offers available to you that are not available on the website. So if anybody would like to try them, I would recommend going through Tressa.
Either way, I just want people to get the help that they need. So yeah, we really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend.
Take care, everyone.